So I'm going to be getting into a proof that the Gospels are written through eyewitness testimony. And there's going to be a few things I'm going to go through, but I'm going to go through chronological order. Okay, so I have this translation of the Apostolic Fathers by J.B. Lightfoot. So I have a couple fragments of Papias. I say Papias. And here is one fragment. Lord to the faith and derived from the truth itself. And again, on any occasion when a person came in my way who had been a follower of the elders, I would inquire about the discourses of the elders, what was said by Andrew or by Peter or by Philip or by Thomas or James or by John or Matthew or any of the other Lord's disciples, and what Aristion and the elder John, the disciples of the Lord, say. For I did not think that I could get much profit from the contents of the books as from utterances of a living and abiding voice. So here you might think, why would he repeat John and then say the elder John? Well, the elders here refers to the apostles. And then down here, and what Aristion and the elder John, the disciples of the Lord, say, these are the elders that he actually knew. These are the disciples that he actually knew. It was Aristion and the elder John. So he puts them into two groupings, the apostles who he heard from tradition, and then the two he knew, which was Aristion and the elder John, which the elder John, up here it says the elders are the apostles, so the elder John is the apostle. So this is establishing that the elder John is someone that Pius knew. So down here, and the elders said this also, Mark, having become the interpreter of Peter, wrote down accurately everything that he remembered, without having recorded in order what was either said or done by Christ. For neither did he hear the Lord, nor did he follow him, but afterwards, as I said, attended Peter, who adapted his instruction to the needs of his hearers, but had no design of giving a connected account of the Lord's oracles. So then Mark made no mistake while he wrote down some things as he remembered them. For he made it his one care not to omit anything that he heard, or to set down any false statement therein. So then Matthew composed the oracles in the Hebrew language, and each one interpreted them as he could. So this came from the elder John. Now there is a interpolation by Eusebius, and this is what has created the confusion where it separates the elder John from the apostle John. But up here in this first chapter, it is clearly establishes the elders are the apostles. So the elder John and Aristion are people that he actually knew. These are people that he actually knew, and the elder John is one of the apostles. Down here we get from the elder John people who he knew, Mark and Matthew, who wrote down the gospel. So the gospels come directly from first-hand witnesses. And then here's two other fragments from the Vatican in the 9th century. Here beginneth the argument to the gospel according to John. The gospel of John was made known and given to the churches by John, while he yet remained in the body, as one Papias by name of Hierapolis, a beloved disciple of John, had related in the 5 exegetical books, but he wrote down the gospel at the direction of John correctly. So here we established that the elder John is actually John the Apostle. And here, for last of these, John surnamed the Son of Thunder, when he was now a very old man, as Irenaeus and Eusebius and a succession of trustworthy historians have handed down to us, about the time when terrible heresies had cropped up, dictated the gospel to his own disciple, the virtuous Papias of Hierapolis, to fill up what was lacking in those who before him had proclaimed the word to the nations throughout all the earth. So here we have the fact that John, the Son of Thunder, the elder John, and it says here that Eusebius actually accounted this, but that's not the fragment we have. Eusebius is actually discounting it, but here it says Eusebius did, so Eusebius had a change of mind, which we don't have any extent of this. And this comes from Catena, Patre, Grace, and St. John, published by B. Corder. So the Gospel of John was dictated by John through Papias. Okay, now the way we know Luke is that Luke in the first chapter of Acts is addressing the same person in Luke's gospel. So we know Luke accompanied Paul because Luke traveled with Paul. He uses first person in the book of Acts, so Luke literally traveled with Paul. So Luke might actually be our earliest gospel, or maybe Matthew is. But the fact of the matter is that we have this concurrent train of events that proves to us that the Gospels are indeed written by and through eyewitnesses. And another thing I would like to say is by 160 to 170 AD, we have Tatian writes down the Diatessaron, who has the entire complete corpus of all 4 Gospels, with minor exceptions, so it's about 80% complete. He tried to reconcile all 4 Gospels into one coherent narrative, and this was in the 2nd century by about 160 AD. So this shows that the Gospels were in heavy circulation by then. It was already written in the Syriac tongue. It was written in many different tongues, and this shows that the Gospels have early authorship. Not to mention that we have people dying and being killed. We have many accounts of the apostles being killed for their belief in the early centuries under the reign of Nero. So So the fact of the matter is the Gospels are witnesses because these men died believing that Jesus raised from the dead. And then we have these direct connections with who the authorship is from through Papias and also Luke, who traveled with Paul. And Paul met James and Peter and John and Mary. Because remember, Mary and John were an item. They were together. John was to take care of her. So Paul would have met Mary, and then Luke would have met her too and had the information about the infant birth. So another thing is that we get this supposed contradiction about the census. Why would Mary go down to Bethlehem to have her census recorded? Remember, this is a woman. She doesn't have the full political knowledge of the time period. So likely Joseph was taking Mary down to Bethlehem to have Jesus born in Bethlehem, so that way he'd have a seed because he was of the lineage of David, and so was she. So they wanted their seed born in Bethlehem. And then there was, by consequence and coincidence, a census at that time. And they recorded their census that they were born in, that they were from Nazareth, and they had Jesus there in the census too. So yeah, I just think that's the fact. That those are the facts, that the Gospels are eyewitness, and there's no doubt about it. In fact, that little memory lapse we have in the Gospel of Luke shows that Luke got this information from someone he heard it from. Because that little, it would have been corrected had someone gone back and looked over this, but it wasn't. In fact, it was just simply understood, and it had to have been from Mary's memory. Because, again, she's a woman. She's not fully understanding the political climate or the situation or the laws. She's just telling it how she thought. And now establishing that the Gospels are indeed witnesses, which I give about 4 pieces of information saying that they were. It's conclusive that Jesus actually lived, and he fulfilled Isaiah 53, he fulfilled Psalm 2, he fulfilled Psalm 22, he fulfilled Zechariah 6, he fulfilled so many different prophecies, and he was a true human being. He actually lived. So the Bible is prophesying, just like Jeremiah could read Deuteronomy and understand that Jerusalem was going to collapse. You could read in the day of Jesus Isaiah, which we still have in the Great Isaiah Scroll, that Isaiah 53 actually has it in there. So it's 100% conclusive that Jesus actually did fulfill Jewish prophecy in many, many different forms. And then when he returns, he's going to fulfill even more Jewish prophecy about the conquering and about the slaying of the evil ones. So, it's just so important that we understand this, that Jesus actually lived. And if you can make that connection that the Gospels are actually indeed eyewitnesses, or they're based on the testimony of eyewitnesses, then you can definitely say that Jesus is the Messiah, because he fulfilled 360 prophecies, which even fulfilling 8 prophecies is something like 10 to the 17th power. So, and then he fulfilled hundreds of them. There's 60 major prophecies, and then there's hundreds of minor prophecies of Jesus too that he fulfilled, and even some we don't even recognize. Like, for instance, he never dashed his foot against a stone. He didn't have a bed. Just major things like that just shows Jesus is the Son of God, because he actually did fulfill these prophecies, and he actually did raise from the dead, because these men, his disciples, actually died believing it. I have Martyr's Mirror on my bookshelf, which I think comes from a pretty reliable tradition, that these men died believing that Jesus was indeed the Son of God, and they only would do that because he actually came back and ate and drank and walked through walls and did all sorts of wonderful things. Jesus is the Lord, and it's just proven here. There's no doubt about it. And then, all things aside, Thomas actually touched his wounds, but you couldn't recreate that. And Thomas died, according to church tradition, he was stuck in a furnace like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. He didn't die, so they took him out and they took red hot irons and they skewered him with it and killed him. So he actually died believing this. He was down in Persia, I think it was, ministering the gospel, and they killed him. So it's just a beautiful thing, because it's true.